Thank you all for being here, and thank you for being engaged. After November 8th, we all went through quite a bit of trauma. And I'm involved with another Indivisible group that's based in Boulder here, but I just want to thank you all for being active, engaged citizens. So I'm running for Boulder City Council to bring a bolder form of democracy to Boulder, Colorado. So in some ways, I'm really running a much more meta campaign that's addressing the way that we do representative democracy in our community, rather than running on certain issues that I'm trying to convince you I'm an expert on. I'm not an expert on most things. But I do really believe in democracy. I'm a hardcore small d Democrat, and it's kind of painful to be a small d Democrat in our world today because democracy is in crisis around the world. It's in crisis globally. It's definitely in crisis nationally. I don't think we need any more exhibit than 2016. And even locally, as I'll get to, there's a lot of disillusionment and disaffection with how we do democracy in our community here in Boulder. But just for some stats, like if you go back into the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s, and you queried people in this country on whether it was essential for them to live in a democracy, consistently, going back to the 20s, 2/3 of Americans said that it was an essential element of their life that they live in a democracy. Today, it's below 1/3, which is extremely alarming. And the reason that's a concern is because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. When we see a decline in belief, faith, and trust in democracy, we actually see a commensurate rise in belief in authoritarian government. So this same survey that goes back to the 20s found that whereas in the 20s and right up until basically the noughts, usually less than 1 in 16 Americans were ever in favor of the potential for military rule. Today, that's around 1 in 6. 1 in 6 Americans actually can reconcile themselves to military governance. And these numbers are replicated around the world. So we are in this global crisis around belief in faith and trust in democracy. And my contention is that what a fundamental element to that, and it's not just mine, I get a lot of my research from kind of the canon of democratic theory, is that the way that we do democracy hasn't really been updated in 240 years. We basically crystallized this one paradigm of democratic engagement that was late Enlightenment, late 18th century democracy, and that has become the exclusive model of democratic engagement and participation and legitimation of government that we have not only crystallized in this country, but that we've spread around the world, and that is what people tend to think of as democracy. That representative democracy is democracy, and the frustration that we have around the world with representative governments is being conflated with democracy as such. And there is a lot of movement now to disrupt the way that we do democracy and to update it into the 21st century. One mechanism that I have seen work around the world and that I believe we can bring to the United States is a notion called liquid democracy. And this is basically introducing a digital element in how people can engage with representative offices. So in Argentina, there are members of parliament who are using this. In the Netherlands, in Germany, in Iceland, the third largest party in the government is using a system like this. In Australia, you have the Flux Party. In New Zealand, there are people that are using this. And the essence of this is what's called a Trojan legislator. So someone runs for office, but they run on the singular issue that they are going to defer to the decision outcomes of their constituency on every single decision that they face. And this is what I'm doing here in Boulder. In a nutshell, that's it. That's my only issue. It's a pledge to all of you that on every single decision that I would face in office, I would open up to the public through a digital democracy platform called Party.vote to directly weigh in. And not just to vote, but actually to lobby one another. And if you're an expert or if you know a lot about an issue, you can lobby the people in your network to support the direction that you think that 1 of 9 seats decision should go. So this is a radical notion. As I said, this hasn't been done in the United States yet, but I believe that it's coming. Technology is going to disrupt our governing systems the way that it has everything else. And I think we need to get ahead of the curve. And if there's one community that I know of in the United States that can do that, it's Boulder, Colorado. And those big abstract global numbers or national numbers, they also resonate here. Last year, the National Research Council surveyed Boulder, and we score at the very top in almost every issue that they consider in terms of quality of life, the environment, the economy, recreation, except there's one area where we actually score 230 of 290 cities in this country. And that's along the question, do you believe your local elected officials implement policies that reflect your values? And only 36% of Boulder could agree affirmatively with that. So 64% of Boulder believes that city council, their elected officials, are pursuing policies that go against their values. Yet, only 18% actually had engaged with their local elected officials, ever. So we have this discrepancy between 2/3 of our community is disaffected by the elected officials, yet only less than 1/5 actually engage with it. And what that tells me is that the mechanisms by which you can engage with and you can participate in local elected government is insufficient. I believe that digital means so that rather than show up at Tuesday at a certain hour, sign up for 2 minutes and hang out for a few hours, for those 2 minutes, you should be able to just click on your phone and have your voice be heard. And these systems are allowing for that. I'll just kind of end on something that's really surprised me as I've initiated this campaign and started to have these conversations in our community about democracy. And that's just how much, and I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this based on the numbers, but how much there is a latent anti-democratic sentiment in our community, and particularly amongst the people who are already engaged in local government in our community, who tend to be the elite, education-wise, economically. And I often have to push back and explain why I do believe in democracy. And the best kind of synthesis of this is, has anyone ever heard of the wisdom of the crowds? It's a fascinating social phenomena that was first observed in the early 20th century. And like the classic instance of this is if you're at like a county fair and there's an ox, and there's like, write on a sheet of paper what you think that ox weighs. Well, it ends up most people are really bad at that. And the numbers are all over the place. But something really interesting happens when you start to average out those guesses and those estimates. And you very quickly narrow in on the actual number, to the point where if you get 100 people, you're within 2 to 5%. If you get 1,000 people, you're under, you're in the decimal points of the percentage of that weight. And I've done this in classrooms when I've taught this concept with like a big thing of marbles. And it's extraordinary how quickly, when you query all of the people, you get a very precise replication of the reality. And for me, this is the ultimate case for democracy. It's that the more brain cells, the more neurons you have firing on a problem of social concern, the better outcome you're gonna get on average than if you just have a handful of people and a handful of people that they spoke to making those decisions. So what we're trying to do at Party is build digital mechanisms to basically link up brains. And it hasn't been done in the United States yet. Again, I really do believe that Boulder would be an appropriate place to start experimenting with this. And I just ask that you have the courage to lead on this the way that we've led in so many other ways, with 1 of 9 of our council seats. To have 1 of 9 of our council seats be a continuous representation of what the people of Boulder want. So I have 1 minute for a quick question if there's anyone.
Sure.
Yeah, well, someone said that fracking is not allowed in Boulder, the city of Boulder. It's allowed in open space, and the underground drilling can now go 2 miles horizontally.
Yeah.
So you're very excited about democracy. So am I.
Mm-hmm.
How are you gonna facilitate it so that the people of Boulder can vote on their future and keep the oil and gas industry out of our environment?
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a great example of an issue where there actually is kind of a consensus in Boulder against fracking, and yet with the council members we have, they maybe get redirected in their interest.
They refuse to put it on the ballot.
And so this is an instance where I think having 1 of the 9 seats being a direct reflection of the people of Boulder would at least hold the rest of the council members accountable. And I would just say there's one issue where I do need to take a public stance because of executive sessions. I may have to be making decisions in private, and that would be municipalization. I am very much in favor of moving forward with it. Thank you.